So there's been a lot of discussion about how the current streaming model of television is pretty unpleasant for everyone involved. Most of this comes from the perspective of being in the entertainment industry, like this great video that gets into how this is hurting actors, writers, and crew. Most articles take that angle as well, and I've linked a few in the description. What I find a little strange, however, is that many of us regular folks also take that perspective when talking about it, like how big the budgets are, which is true, how watch numbers are kept hidden, which is suspicious, how everything is canceled all of the time, which is definitely the worst. And those are all obviously a huge part of the problem, but is that really what you notice first as a viewer? Since most of us are members of the audience, I would think that there would be more discussion about how frustrating this version of television has become, because this used to be a way to unwind at the end of the day.
Times like that, it's comforting to know there's always one thing that can pick your spirits up.
Now I have decision fatigue before I even hit play on something. First, you have to know which streamers exist, then decide which ones to pay for. And do you go by cost or by their catalog? Both are always changing, so it takes some research to keep up to date. Then you have to dig through the catalog to see what is actually available for you to watch. And then once you've picked it, you have to consider if it is an old show or a new one. Old shows switch platforms all the time, so make sure you finish it before it leaves. And new shows are so short you'll finish it in a couple of days, tops, and have to go through the whole process again. Plus they are being canceled left and right if you don't binge it fast enough. Now, because I had something else to do when a show debuted, I am somehow culpable for real human beings not being able to put food on the table. That's like as stressful as my day job, and I work with children. And notice how at no point do you get to make a decision about if you like the show or not. Audience enjoyment is somehow barely a consideration in television these days, even for us members of the audience. We just have to binge everything as quickly as possible. It's all exhausting, but I think there's more to it than that. So let's take this time together to go back a decade or two and get into how television used to work, and how the changes to that model are leaving you unsatisfied and anxious.
I am advertiser Tracy Jordan, and I approve this message. I am an advertiser.
Yes, I know some streamers are now advertising, but in the old days, shows and their budgets were designed around selling ad time. It was more complex than I'm going to get into here, but studios greenlit shows that stood a chance of getting a return on their budget by advertising, not from just the cost of someone purchasing cable. And ad breaks were a benefit for the viewer as well. It gave you time to process the story and think about what would happen next, relieve the tension so it can be ramped up again afterward, as well as giving you a good spot to get a snack or go to the bathroom. HBO had basically the only ad-free model back in the day.
I don't think the Home Builders Organization is going to be supporting us.
Yeah, the HBO is not going to want us.
It cost a hefty price, but you could get prestige shows without ads, with high budgets, and it was made for adults who care about television as a medium. It worked well enough, apparently, though I never knew anyone who had HBO. It was a selling point of going to a hotel, actually. But now everyone else has wanted a piece of that pie, which means that all the costs of doing business no longer involve courting advertisers. Instead, it means going directly to the consumer. I imagine it's nice for them to cut out the middleman, but as the consumer, that means all of those costs are getting deferred to me somehow. I'm not a corporation. It's gonna take a huge number of folks like us to pay for something that, like, Downey can afford to sponsor a couple times a day. Streamers are now using ads, but I've seen nothing in the industry talk to suggest that they are treating advertising money as the way to fund everything. The goal still seems to be selling more subscriptions to everyone possible, multiple per household if they can, and obviously that's going to break down. We, the audience, are stretched too far by what we're already paying, and it's worse than cable now to try to have access to everything. Very frustrating and exhausting to contemplate how to pay these bills that used to be covered by corporations.
I'm the new vice president of East Coast Television and Microwave Oven Programming. That sounds like you program microwave ovens.
Cable networks had programming. When I used to watch Community, one of the very few shows I watched airing from pilot to finale, it was on a Thursday night comedy block on NBC. It also had The Office, Parks and Rec, other things like that. Most channels had a night for drama and another for comedy. There are a few benefits for us, the audience, with television programming. One is that individual channels usually had a brand. If you liked one show on their channel, you'd probably like others. Another is that they would arrange similar shows to be back to back. That encouraged you to just keep watching instead of changing the channel, but it made it really easy to discover new shows. Finally, programming provided a water cooler conversation. Everyone watched the same episode last night, so you'd have something to talk about the next day. It created a community feeling, which I'm sure the studios liked because then more people would watch so they could feel included. But as a viewer, it was really nice to be on the same page as everyone else. Fandoms were built around it, for one thing, but it benefited casual viewers as well. My friends may not have watched Community on their own, but they knew it was an easy way to hang out with me on Thursday nights. The same goes for watching Castle with my mom once a week. Sure, streaming means that I can pick what I want to watch whenever I want, but if I'm watching it alone, that takes away a significant aspect of what made television enjoyable. Maybe I watch things alone in my house then, but I would text my friends about it knowing they were seeing the same episodes at the same time. Now I can't talk to anyone in fandom or out of it until I've caught up on the most recent episodes, which often means watching the entire show before I engage with it because I want to avoid spoilers.
Oh my god, no spoilers. No, we haven't watched it yet.
You guys watching Mad Men this season?
Stop. I had no idea.
Spoiler alert.
Don't spoil it. Father is actually Darth Vader.
Anyway, obviously, I am capable of working out how to include socialization as part of my viewing experience, but my point is that it used to be low effort for everyone involved. Now, if we want to watch something together, we all have to already subscribe to the same service and be willing to watch at the same speed. There's a reason that some streamers have gone back to scheduling when episodes drop and spreading them out. It significantly adds to the hype and keeps it in the conversation, and having more of a community experience with our entertainment makes it more enjoyable. The biggest problem with the lack of programming is that picking something to watch is now entirely on our shoulders. There are some recommendation features, but nothing like how programming worked. The different streamers do not have the same kind of brand fidelity that cable channels did, and they're all trying to entice every person on Earth to watch. That makes it pretty difficult for us, overwhelmed by choices, to find something we'll actually like. It's exhausting to try to stay on top of shows, and there's a reason this meme is so relatable.
Hiding out in a monastery. Jonathan, bring me my green light.
The third thing that televisions used to have were TV pilots, and that's mostly what we're going to talk about today. A television pilot was something studios would produce to test out a show. It would usually be the first episode and was a proof of concept. Test audiences would be brought in to gauge their reactions, and studio heads would make notes. Sometimes that meant the initial plot aired as it was, and the show was picked up for its first season. Other times that meant doing some tweaking to and reshooting the pilot before it aired, and then the rest of the show was greenlit. Or it might do badly and disappear from existence, other than allowing actors to get SAG credit for appearing in it. But this isn't an industry video. That's what a pilot was for the studio, back when they did them, but by that being the design of the first episode, generally speaking, it also provided a very useful service to us in the audience. The pilot had to make the idea of the show as marketable as possible for studio execs and for test audiences. The latter were definitely asked if they would consider watching more of a show like this, which means that we were able to watch the first episode and make that same decision based just off of the pilot. And that's a pretty important quality for a show to have.
This is the best show I've ever seen in my entire life.
Okay, so we're gonna dig into this, but first I have to define a few terms. Episodic shows are ones where the main storyline of each episode is introduced and resolved within that episode. For example, sitcoms may have character development across the season, but each individual episode will have its own adventure for the characters, which may or may not impact continuity. Mystery shows and those with monsters of the week are all episodic. I'm far from the first to point out that these kinds of shows essentially do not exist exist on streaming platforms. Well, they exist, they are consistently the most watched shows, but there aren't many new ones being made. If they are released primarily on cable and then come to streaming rather than being made to be streamed. The other side of the coin is a show that is serialized but not episodic. Prestige TV like Game of Thrones, Breaking Bad, The Sopranos, etc. were all serialized. They told one main story that is divided into smaller pieces. They were noteworthy for not returning the characters to a status quo at the end, and that was a large part of the prestige. The stakes could always be raised higher. And now it's these kinds of shows that are getting greenlit. Sure, there are some reality shows, a lot of documentaries, and a few long-running Case of the Week cop shows, but if it's new, it's most likely a short, serialized series. Even some that were more episodic have become less so. The first season of The Mandalorian was largely a Monster of the Week show. That's no longer the case. Even most of the Star Treks, one of the bastions of episodic storytelling for decades, are now serialized instead, except for this one, which is by far the best. Perhaps not a coincidence. The last term we need to know is not related to television. It's from neuroscience. Trust me, I'm a doctor. Working memory is a part of your memory that is used when you are actively focused on an activity. Let's say you're baking some delicious brownies. If you've never baked them before, your working memory is going to be juggling all of this new information about how to put the ingredients together. It will be a workout for your working memory. But if you have baked them before, you have other aspects of your memory that can help you keep track of what to do. So it'll be less of a workout, and you'll be able to consider multiple steps at once or multitask with another activity at the same time. Episodic shows are a relief for your working memory, even if you binge them. Each one is self-contained, so whatever story threads and setups your working memory has to start juggling at the beginning of the show, all of them will be paid off or resolved by the end. So you'll be able to put each of them down as you go. When you start a new episode, you generally won't have any residual pressure on your working memory.
Smile for the camera.
And how do serialized shows affect your working memory? Well, that's what I find fairly interesting and depressing. So I want to look at some episodes of a few serialized shows that released to cable and a few that have released to streaming and talk about what's changed. Let's start with the streamers, but first, I just want to be very clear here. I pick shows that I really like and think are objectively some of the best things on streaming. Please keep that in mind, and minor spoilers for Moon Knight, WandaVision, and Russian Doll. And because we're going to be talking about the pilots of the older shows, I decided we should talk about the first episodes of these shows. Even though studios don't use pilot episodes these days, the first episode still has the job of trying to get you hooked. In the first episode of Moon Knight, we meet Stephen Grant. We go through a day in his life, and we are encouraged to ask quite a few questions along the way. The overarching question of the episode is, what's the deal with Stephen and his sleeping disorder? You might also wonder, what's the purpose of this scarab? And why does the villain's ritual here not work on Stephen? The whole episode is a lot like a psychological thriller with a protagonist who is unreliable for us to follow. We don't know who is speaking here.
Go back to sleep, worm.
Hello?
What's going on with this monster, or who that guy is. At the end of the episode, we understand hapless gift shopist Stephen Grant and are likely enthralled by his bizarre circumstances. We want answers about all of this. Our working memory is going through quite the workout as we try to keep track of all the information the show presents to us and understand what it means. It ends with no answers to our questions, just a cliffhanger that reveals our title character. Can't wait to watch more and find out what's going on. In the first episode, Russian Doll, we meet Nadia and have a day in her life. Well, the same one a couple of different times. We start at her birthday party, she interacts with some guests, and goes to look for her cat, resulting in her death. Then back in time to her birthday party again. This time she doesn't leave with this guy, and that means she doesn't get hit by the taxi. But she still dies after finding her cat, who mysteriously disappears. Back in time to the birthday party again, and the episode ends with her choosing another option. Like with Moon Knight, we have a lot of questions as we watch. Mainly what is going on with Nadia and this time loop. How can she escape it? Does the cat trigger her death? Will she survive this time? We have some information information about how she can change the circumstances of her birthday evening. Her actions seem to matter, but no idea if she can free herself from the loop or if she does at the same time, no matter what she does. We end with her new choice being successful so far.
Be careful.
Can't wait to watch more and find out what's going on. In the first episode of WandaVision, it is a delightful pastiche of 1950s sitcoms. Wanda is a housewife with a nosy neighbor. Vision has a new job and pressure from the boss to show how normal he is. Mr. and Mrs. Hart come over for dinner. There was a hilarious misunderstanding. Our leads have to be charming, and screwball comedy ensues. As a viewer, you may be confused, but you're probably just enjoying the episode. Until right here.
Stop it! Stop it!
When we are literally taken out of the show by a different camera angle from how shows were made in the 50s, and everyone waiting until Wanda sets them right.
Stop it! Stop it!
Vision, help him.
To us in the audience, that's very exciting and intriguing. We end with someone apparently watching the show we just watched. Also intriguing. Why are our heroes here? What does this mean? Or this? Can't wait to watch more and find out what's going on. Okay, so let's talk about some serialized stories from cable television. And let's start with one of the biggest. The first episode begins with this scene. Immediately intriguing. Why is this man in a suit and tie in the jungle? Or this dog? Or this shoe? Why do we hear screaming? Oh, it's because of a catastrophic plane crash. Then Jack shows how good he is in a crisis as he surveys the situation and treats everyone in order of severity. We are introduced to our other main characters along the way, including this nice talk with Kate, who will be our co-lead for the episode.
I'd let the fear in, let it take over, let it do its thing, but only for 5 seconds. So I started to count. 1, 2.
Once things are no longer an emergency, our characters turn to ways of getting rescued. Boone tries his satellite phone. Saeed gets a signal fire going. Jack decides they need to find the cockpit to get a transceiver that can be tracked. Kate and Charlie help him with that mission. But before they go, this happens. What does that mean? Anyway, our heroes still go out into the jungle. We get a reminder of the danger, and then they find the pilot and talk to him. And he gives us the answer to a lot of our questions.
Has anybody come? Our radio went out. We were 1,000 miles off course. They're looking for us in the wrong place.
Now they really need that transceiver. It's the only thing that might work. This scene gives us some payoff by having Jack successfully get the transceiver, much higher stakes, and then even higher stakes as the monster is proven to be dangerous to humans. And Charlie wraps us up with a cliffhanger question.
How does something like that happen?
I realize that all of the streaming shows I picked have similarly unreliable protagonists. None of them know what's going on, and no one in Lost knows what's going on. Because of that, the audience is encouraged to ask a lot of questions as the plot develops. But unlike the streamers, Lost gives us some answers, and that is a significant relief to our working memory and makes the viewing experience more satisfying. Not everything gets an answer, obviously. We don't know why Charlie or John Locke are acting strangely, and we definitely don't know where they are or what the heck is in the jungle. But this first scene stretches the tension before answering what's going on. A plane crash. We find out that satellite phones don't work, that the signal fire was ineffective, that the front of the plane landed elsewhere. We then find out they need a transceiver, and they obtain it before the end of the episode. We even get some character payoffs to establish what a lot of this show will actually be about. Yes, I want to watch more and find out what's going on. That's kind of how the show works. But unlike the streamers, I'm not left entirely in the dark after one episode. I had questions, and the show provided satisfying answers. And it gives me a really solid picture of what watching Lost will be like. At least for the first season. There will be some kind of mission for survival, plenty of character interactions and drama to drive the plot, with some flashbacks that flesh out the characters, and some weird sci-fi thing thrown in for spice. That's it. That's the show. And this was just part 1 of the pilot. But my point is that this is serialized, yes, but with episodic elements.
My husband keeps reminding me to tell him that when he gets back from the bathroom.
Maybe we should do one of those whole things. You know, stick the pen in the throat.
Yeah, good idea. You go get me a pen.
I don't know which one worked best. They're all good.
1, 2. We might be able to find a transceiver. We could send out a signal, help the rescue party find us.
Just leave me!
Just don't tell anyone. Okay, let's look at a very different show's first episode. Jane the Virgin is about Jane, who is a virgin, as we learn in the first scene. This is followed by an introduction to our various characters and specifically to the circumstances that led to this moment.
The so-called Immaculate Conception of Jane Gloriana Villanueva.
Jane is artificially inseminated unknowingly because Petra wanted to secure her marriage and Louisa wants out of hers. That brings us to the main question of the episode. What is Jane going to do about the pregnancy?
But I've never had sex.
The rest of the episode, like Lost, provides an emergency to which our characters react, and that's how we get to know them. Most of the tension in the show comes from the audience knowing things that one or more characters on screen do not know, and being invested in how they could possibly reconcile with that revelation.
Sounds perfect.
Okay, before we eat...
As will continue to be the case, the tension is relieved when the characters tell the truth. Dr. Louisa confesses to Jane, and then Raphael and Petra. Raphael confesses to Jane that he's the father. Jane confesses to multiple people that she is pregnant. By the end of the episode, the question of what to do has been answered, and Jane has had a resolution scene with everyone in her family. We have a few threads left hanging: the investigation, Raphael and Petra's marriage, Rogelio de la Vega, but we wrap things up before we go to the next one.
Jane Gloriana Villanueva really believed that to be true.
As with Lost, the fact that so many ideas paid off means that our working memory can put some things down. We get relief from both having our characters confess to each other, but also because we don't have to keep juggling the information that's being shared. It's been resolved. Plus, we have a good picture of what the show will be like. If you enjoyed the character drama in a heightened scenario, you'll probably enjoy the rest of the season. And if you didn't, then you won't.
Vamos, anda, trata.
I can't.
And then, everything changed. And saw Jane's father again.
How could you keep my daughter a secret all these years?
Nunca puedes volver atrás, y eso es lo que sucede cuando pierdes tu virginidad. Nunca puedes volver atrás.
You don't have to have a baby. Would you have had me? If Grandma hadn't made you? I'm glad I had you.
Yo le pedí que abortara.
What?
Pero cargo esa vergüenza en mi corazón cada día. Eres la parte más importante de mi vida. Y esto va a ser la parte más importante de tu vida también.
Fact is, I'm having the baby.
You've been dating for 2 years and you haven't boned. He might move up your timeline.
Our timeline.
Who cares about the timeline?
I am confused about every single thing in my life. Except you. Okay. Okay, let's not.
Finally, let's talk about Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. Like Jane the Virgin, it starts with a flashback to our protagonist's youth that sets up the drama for the episode. We meet Rebecca Bunch, in love with Josh Chan, who isn't on the same page.
I just think that we're just really different, you know?
Then we jump forward to her being an unhappy lawyer in New York City who happens to run into Josh on the street. It makes her feel like glitter is exploding inside of her, and she immediately takes action. She quits her job to go,
"It's where dreams live,"
and goes to West Covina, California, which is
only 2 hours from the beach.
And also happens to be where Josh lives. But that's not why she's here.
Also, by coincidence, Josh just happens to be here.
We watch her go through setting up her life, increasingly concerned about what she's doing and what's going to happen when she's caught in a lie, especially after her antagonist is introduced.
Thank you
for not telling me the truth because I will figure it out.
Until the end of the episode, where she is confronted. Instead of blowing it up, Paula gives her a good reason for what she's been doing.
Hear me, you're not crazy. You're in love.
And they are on the same page.
This guy Josh just happens to be.
So the central question of how long can Rebecca lie to herself is answered at the close of the episode, with a tease for what might happen next.
Josh Chan, wanna grab dinner? Smiley face.
It's not closed quite as neatly as Jane the Virgin, especially without a narrator, but like Lost, some of the questions you had while watching have been answered. And you now know what kind of show you're watching. There'll be musical numbers, satirical and sincere, and Rebecca is her own antagonist.
Everyone stop giving me the shakedown. I am not having a nervous.
As far as working memory, several of the jokes are set up, reminded, and paid off in this episode, as well as illustrating who our characters are. The musical numbers provide an easy-to-remember way for us to process the information of Rebecca's internal motivations. And while her lies may be important later, we have resolved them with our two lead characters. So we have a lot of things that can be set down instead of continuously juggled.
Ask yourself, when was the last time you were truly happy?
I'm in love, she's in love.
Let a good one get away, huh? That's what I want.
It's near the beach, right?
Yeah, only 2 hours. 4 in traffic.
Only 2 hours from the beach.
Beach? We're 4 hours from the beach. People say 2, but those people are dumb.
Yeah, so weird, right? LOL.
But right now I got a thing.
Text. Are you a witch?
Who is this person?
Cause I'm hopelessly, desperately in love with West Covina.
Don't you talk about my friend like that ever again.
West Covina, California.
Have you seen the new fall shows?
Yes, I have seen them.
My point in all of this is to illustrate how streaming shows are really good at engagement hooks and cliffhangers, but perhaps not better than older shows, and they also lack any kind of payoff within the episode. It's not true of every single thing created for streaming. Willow continues to be the best show ever by having conclusive episodes, but it is true for most shows. That's a significant part of why television is so exhausting now. You're working memory is running laps, and there's no reprieve until the show is actually over. On cable, even shows that were serialized and not designed to be episodic still had some kind of resolution to each episode. Now there's no resolution. Once they've got their hooks in you, they leave you hanging. Sure, if you've seen the show before and are therefore not relying on your working memory, you might tell me that we've resolved something with Moon Knight and Steven here. But there's no clear information given on if this is even really happening and not a dream, let alone how Steven fits into the whole Avatar situation. You may be able to guess what's going on with Wanda, but the crazy theorizing every week was due to the fact that we have no answers in the first episode and won't for a while. Rebecca has to admit she orchestrated everything in episode 1. Wanda doesn't until halfway through the season. Nadia has figured out a bit more than the others regarding her situation, but there's nothing definite at the end of the episode. Again, these are very good shows. I am definitely not saying they would be better with different first episodes, though I do think it is telling that this technique works well with shows that have unreliable protagonists and maybe isn't that effective on any other kind of show. In any case, these are good shows because they pay off all their setups eventually and they resolve their storylines by the end of the season. But there are plenty of mediocre or bad shows on streaming, or ones you just won't be interested in personally, and they're all structured this same way. So you have no way of knowing which shows you'll like and which ones you won't until you've finished them. If you watch Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, Lost, or Jane the Virgin, you can tell from any one episode if the show is for you or not. If you didn't like this one, there isn't going to be some satisfying payoff down the road that will make it worth sticking around. It's about the journey, not the destination, man. But streamers are built around the destination. All you can expect along the way is increasing pressure on your working memory, more stress and exhaustion, and the small hope that the ending will be good. But it might not be, and you have no way to know how this show handles resolutions until you've gotten to the end. I was first struck by this when I thought about how I used to be able to recommend shows after just catching an episode or two. Yeah, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is fun. You should tune in next week. But now any Disney Plus show I can't recommend unless I've watched the whole thing. I can't tell you if it's worth watching until I know how it ends. So we're all waiting until things end to try them because otherwise they might just hang us out to dry. And that's exhausting. Even if you didn't like where Lost eventually ended, it was enjoyable to watch each episode because there were situations and character arcs that resolved before the end of it. If you weren't team J-Fael, you could still enjoy most individual episodes of Jane the Virgin. And if you didn't care for Rebecca ending up alone, because obviously she should end up with Nathaniel, you can enjoy the music and the arcs in each episode. If I don't like how Loki ends, then I don't like Loki as a show. If I don't care for this ending, or this one, then I probably won't ever watch an episode of the show again, because all of the episodes are just setting up the ending. They aren't paying off anything else. This can go really well, but it's a lot of pressure to put on what is functionally just one episode of television, especially when getting it right is not something many shows have been known to do. How I Met Your Mother, an extremely episodic show, got its ending so wrong that people don't even remember it exists. Game of Thrones, the progenitor of all these streaming shows, is only known for how badly it ended. I rewatched its first episode for this too, and streamers definitely got it from here. They are following Game of Thrones because there's no resolution in each episode. We have a few engagement hooks and then a big cliffhanger. The idea of Ned becoming the Hand is discussed, but he does not agree to it in this episode. So your working memory has to kick it into overdrive to watch the season, with the majority of ideas not paying off until the end, and many continuing into future seasons. There are a lot of reasons why this show ended so badly. The writers just deciding to quit being the biggest one, but it is also due to the structure of each episode. They always build up something more, and there's little that ever pays off. So not only does that mean that the writers are not getting any practice coming up with satisfactory resolutions, it also means that the audience's expectations are continually raised, and that's realistically not something that can ever be satisfied. The same thing famously happened to Lost. Was there any way this show could end that people would have liked? Probably not, once they focused on cultivating anticipation instead of paying off story beats. The more that the writers leave up to audience interpretation, the more people are going to be disappointed when it doesn't live up to their imagined expectations. See WandaVision.
Your shows stink, Jack.
Really? So you don't peacock them?
I don't think so.
So not only do these shows have much shorter seasons, but the episodes we have do not provide the same psychological satisfaction that they used to. They just get you hooked to keep you binging in a frankly unhealthy way. It's effective, but only up to a point. Everyone is rewatching more satisfying shows instead of trying new ones because you never know if it's just gonna leave you hanging. And most people are waiting to find out how the shows resolve before they're willing to give them a try. And now I must admit that I didn't tell you the truth earlier. When I said that studios don't make pilots anymore, that's not exactly true. Sure, they don't make pilot episodes, but the reason that shows are like this now is because the entire season is a pilot. It costs only a little bit more, and then it gets tossed out to us instead of using a test audience to tweak anything. Just like how the change in removing ads means that the costs are deferred to us, and the lack of programming means that the decisions are deferred to us. Now the responsibilities of a test audience are on our shoulders as well. We're the test audience now. They present us with shows that haven't been vetted or gotten any non-industry notes and measure how we react to decide if it's worth investing money in it. And that's the real reason all the discussion around this is so industry focused. I'm afraid, my friend, that you and I have been drafted and are now part of the television industry. What you decide to put on your TV after a long long day is not just a decision on how you want to blow off steam, it's actually part of your work duties, and it will affect all of your colleagues, so be careful. I used to do Nielsen ratings when I had cable, and that meant a couple times a year being paid like $20 to fill out this form and write down what I watched that week. Now, I pay more than twice that a month for the privilege of being an unwitting guinea pig. And we're all in this boat, picking up the labor that someone in the industry used to be paid to do. Hey, who can I talk to about getting those strikes going again? Because I don't think we're being fairly compensated for all the work we're doing.
I don't want to work for an organization that would throw away a tradition.
Anyway, thanks so much for watching. This is a little different from what I usually do. I have a few more episodes like this planned, one on the real reason the MCU is not doing as well these days, and the reason is not superhero fatigue. But if you're a regular here, I'll be back in a couple weeks with another Catwoman episode. Remember to subscribe, ring the bell, join my Patreon, buy me a coffee, all the things so you don't miss it. See you then.